Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 268, and today's date is January 20th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Terrorist Warning in Sochi, the Black Widow Suicide Bombers are on the loose. And yes, it is bombers. And what they think is that there are multiple Black Widow women running around already in the confines of the Olympic Games, and they're searching for them right now, and they're very worried that they might do something at this time. Before I get started, I just want to make a couple announcements here. For those people who donated to the x22report.com site, I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. It really does help. And on another note, those people who've signed up for the alerts, you probably realize that you haven't been getting them, and that is because I upgraded the software that I have to send out the alerts, and of course there is a bug in the software and I'm getting error messages. So I went back to the manufacturer and they're looking to fix it. They realize, yes, we do have a problem, and they're trying to fix the software right now. And as soon as they give me the fix, I will upgrade it, and hopefully we'll get the alerts back working again. Let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to head out to the UK. And as we know, in the UK, people are having a rough time. The UK people are going into their savings, getting payday loans just to make ends meet. And right now, the UK long-term youth unemployment hits a record high. The number of youths who are under 25 years old without a job for 1 year or more increased from 266,000 to 282,000. So a year later, 266,000 in 2012 to 2013 in the same time frame, which was September, it increased by at least 16,000 more people who cannot find work at this time. And we see this happening in every single country in the Eurozone. It's getting worse and worse. I mean, these countries are slipping from, oh, we're in a recession, into a deep recession, teetering on depression at this point. And if we go out to Greece right now, the Greek people having a very, very rough time. They can't even pay their electric bills, and the number of unpaid electric bills grows to about 4 million euro per day, and it's just a huge amount that is going unpaid. So what they have done is they're making payment plans for the electric bill and trying to break it down into smaller chunks so people can pay their bills. So if they're getting a $49 euro bill, they're breaking that down into smaller chunks so they can pay that out. And it is just getting worse and worse out there. And last year, the people that took advantage of this was about 700,000 consumers. This is how many people are having a problem just keeping their electric on. Now, a couple reports ago, I reported that the ECB changed the requirements of the amount of capital the banks need to keep, and it went from 8% to 6%. And this was during their stress test, and it just came out, they decided that they don't have to keep that much. Well, we are seeing the reason for this. The European banks have a capital shortfall of as much as 767 billion euros. And when they were looking at this, they saw like the French banks had 285 billion, Germans at 199 billion, and the Spanish banks have 92 billion. And instead of implementing bail-ins at this time, they said, you know what, let's just manipulate the numbers and say the banks only have to keep 6%, and that should take care of our shortfall for this time. But again, as time goes on, they cannot continually do this, because what are they going to say? Okay, the banks have to keep 4, 2, and then eventually they will have to do bail-ins. And you do not want to be caught keeping your money in the bank when this time comes, because we have to look back to Cyprus, which is the template of this entire thing. You don't want to wake up one morning and say, ooh, I can't take my money out. I should have listened. I should have taken it out, maybe invested a little bit of gold, kept a little cash here, and this way I have the ability to survive. Now, there is a huge problem in Europe, and the Europeans are facing a savings meltdown at this time. And they're warning that inflation that is much higher than interest rates at this time. And the people who keep their money in their banks are not earning interest. They're actually losing money because inflation is higher than the amount of interest they're earning in the bank. So they're actually losing money. And they went on to say that this situation could potentially put the acceptance of the euro currency and the EU as a whole at a risk. And we can see where all this is coming into play. This is going to lead to incredible amounts of bail-ins all around the Eurozone. They're going to do bank holidays, and we're going to see an incredible amount of people going, I don't understand what just happened here. I thought I put my money in the bank and it is safe, and now I can't get to it. And this is going to be a very difficult time for many people, not just in the European countries, but all around the world, who are controlled by the private Western central banks. And we are definitely going to see this occur very soon. Now, China is very upset with the U.S., and we understand that the U.S. just passed the $1.1 trillion spending bill, and the president signed it on Friday, but it included a cyber espionage review process for federal purchases of technology from China, a measure incorporated last year amid growing U.S. concerns over Chinese cyber attacks. And the Chinese are very upset about this, and they're saying that the bill sent a wrong message, and I believe this was done on purpose just to provoke the Chinese a little bit more. Now, I discussed this in my other reports where the United States, the central bankers, need to keep the revenue coming into the United States. And the way to do this is they need to go find money. And what they have done is they created the FACTA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, and they are looking for people who are U.S. citizens who are making money in other countries, might not live in the United States right now, and might live in a foreign nation and earning a living. They want to tax those people. And right now, we understand some countries are going along with this. And in New Zealand, officials are already jumping on board the deeply controversial U.S. Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And the policymakers in New Zealand are working on enabling legislation to comply with the latest addition to the sprawling U.S. tax regime, which authorities there admit would likely conflict with the nation's Bill of Rights, the Human Rights Act, privacy rights, anti-discrimination protections, and more. But they're looking to join and help out any way they can. Now, since this law went into effect, what's happening is, for Americans, especially the middle-class citizens abroad, and those who rely on exports for their U.S. jobs, FACTA has been described by experts as devastating. Some analysts have even called it the worst tax law currently on the books. And what's happening is many of the U.S. citizens are turning in their passports, and they are now denouncing their citizenship. And this is accelerating, and the trend is accelerating because FACTA goes into full effect in mid-2014. So we're going to see a lot of Americans hand in their passports and no longer be citizens of the United States, so they don't have to pay taxes. Again, when a country, which is controlled by a private Western central bank, is in the end game here, they have one choice only. They need to get as much as they possibly can from the people of the country, and they do this by taxing them, continually taxing them, because the debts are rising so fast and so high that they cannot be sustained. So what they do is they first tax in the country, then they look outward. And after that, there's no other place to go. And they understand this, and they're propping it up to keep the system going. And eventually, they will turn to war. And this is what they've been building up to, and this is what they are planning. And we understand that eventually what they're trying to do is they want to disarm the American people. And this is why you're seeing the mass shootings. This is why they are putting and keeping the bills pending in the Senate. They have the UN Arms Treaty, which is pending in the Senate. We have Dianne Feinstein's bill, which is pending in the Senate. And some of the states are looking at this saying, no, 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 you're trampling on the Second Amendment rights, and this cannot be done. And right now in West Virginia, this new bill, which is introduced on January 9th by Fritch and 5 co-sponsors, they introduced HB 2832, the Firearm Protection Act. And again, I don't even know why we need these laws. We have the Constitution, which is the law of the land. And you read the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms cannot be infringed upon. Infringe means limit. Basically, the federal government is limiting what and who can carry, who can have what, and this is not allowed by the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment. But they introduced this bill, and if it was enacted, the bill would render unenforceable any federal law which attempts to ban semi-automatic firearms or to limit the size of magazines of firearm or other limitations on firearms in the states. Now again, they really don't need this because you have rights under the Second Amendment and you're allowed to bear, which means to carry, a weapon which cannot be infringed, which means cannot limit your purchasing, what you're holding, what you want to have. And again, they're putting these laws up, and we can see those cities around the outskirts of the United States, New York, you're looking at Chicago, you're looking at New Jersey, Maryland, California, and if we go around the country, the most populated cities are the ones that are implementing the draconian laws and putting these laws into effect where nobody can have weapons, because they understand those places are going to be very difficult to control when the collapse comes. And they need to get those laws in place first and then spread it out all throughout the country. And this is what they are working on right now. And this is why you see the shootings and the mass shootings and the false flag events, because eventually they want to get the UN Arms Treaty, which is already signed by John Kerry and will be approved by President Obama. They also have the Dianne Feinstein bill, which was shot down during the Boston bombing. And the president asked the Senate to keep it pending there, and the only reason you keep that pending is because they're going to use another false flag event to push this through. And you have to remember, the president has already created all the executive orders to support both of these bills, and you don't create these executive orders unless you're planning to pass these laws. Okay, now, in my reports that I've done, I don't know, about 2 or 3 of them ago, I talked about Mexico trading information, and the DHS, TSA will put you on the fast track, but you just have to give your fingerprint, your iris scan, and all your other information to make it easier to get in and out of Mexico. Well, Canada is doing the same thing now, and the U.S. and Canada have announced plans to share real-time border crossing information. Both countries will receive immediate notifications regarding every third country national, immigrant, and citizen that crosses the U.S.-Canadian border at all ports of entry. Phase 1 of the program began on September 2012, as it allowed both countries to exchange biographic information on U.S. and Canadian permanent residents and third country nationals at the selected ports of entry. Phase 2 of the program began on June 2013, and it extended upon the original information exchange by recording and exchanging this information at all automated and major land ports of entry. And eventually what's going to happen, you'll be getting an iris scan, you'll be getting a fingerprint, you'll be giving a DNA sample. This will all tie into the federal database. They have the Real ID program going forward. This will be hooked to your driver's license, and all this will be in one database to keep track of you, to understand where you are, so they can know every single move you make. And this is the plan. And eventually, in the constitutional free zones, which is 100 miles in from shore or from any country, they will implement checkpoints. And these checkpoints, you'll have to show your real ID, which is your driver's license, and that will be hooked into the database, federal database where they keep all your information, and then you'll be allowed to move along and pass along. And we will see eventually this will spread across the country, and of course they'll say this is to keep you safe from terrorists and to make sure that you are a U.S. citizen. And again, this is completely unconstitutional, and we as a people do not need this at all. This is only being put into place to keep an eye on you, because they are, when I say they, the government, the authorities, the elite, the central bankers are afraid of the people, and this is why they are continually putting all the security into place, because we understand, we know that these are the people who create the terrorism to make you believe and keep you in fear of what is actually really happening. They create these false flags so people say, yes, we need to give up our rights. Yes, but we have to remember that they are the ones who are creating all this terror to keep everyone in fear. And we have to think back to what Benjamin Franklin said: those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And Thomas Jefferson stated, I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. They must stop trading liberty for security. They must stop thinking the role of the government is to be involved in all aspects of their lives. They must take a good look at what the proper role of government is. They must understand that as government expands, liberty contracts, that government is best which governs least. And again, these are the people who fought for our freedoms. They understood what was going on. They understood the central bankers would rise again and take over the country, which they have, and they are, they're pushing their agenda forward while taking our liberties away. And if you can't see that, I don't know what else to say at this point, but this is what's happening right now. Now, we have seen a lot of military drills using live fire. We've seen it in Houston. We've seen it in Miami, where helicopters are flying and shooting in the middle of the city. We saw it in L.A. and many other cities. And right now in South Carolina, Richland County Sheriff's Office has announced that it will be engaging in a joint training exercises on Monday and Tuesday with unidentified units from Fort Bragg. The exercises are scheduled to take place on Monday and Tuesday and will run up to midnight on both days, and will take place largely in Lower Richland near Eastover and Hopkins. Clearly, simulated combat will be part of the drill due to the fact that the residents are being told not to be alarmed by the sound of gunfire or ordnance. Citizens may see military and departmental vehicles traveling in and around rural and metropolitan areas and may hear ordnances being set off or fired, which will be simulated blanks and controlled by trained personnel. So they are continuing with the drills within the country because they understand they need to get the forces ready for the collapse, because when this entire system crumbles and implodes on itself, this is why they are disarming the people in the large cities. This is why they do not want these people to be armed. They want to control what is going to happen, because they understand when people lose their life savings, when people lose everything they've had, they go a little crazy. And people who are not in tune of what is happening or has been happening, they are not going to understand, and they're going to want answers. And the authorities realize this, and they understand that eventually they're going to come for them, and they are scared, and this is why they are trying to push the agenda of disarming the American people. This is the whole plan, because with 80% of the people, if they can get rid of their arms, 20% of the people will be left, and they feel they can control those people. Again, when, and I say when, not if, when the federal government passed the UN Arms Treaty and the Dianne Feinstein bill, what they're going to do is they're going to tell everyone to hand in their arms. If you have this type of weapon or that type of weapon, or it can hold more rounds than specified, you need to go to the police station and hand in your weapon. And we've seen this in other cities. People will line up and they will hand in their weapon, no questions asked. This will be about 80% of the population. The other 20% will not abide by what they are telling them to do. And this is what they're building up these forces to take care of. This is what they're planning on. This is what they're moving and creating these drills for, so they understand how to react to these types of people. Now, the U.S., and we understand what is happening in the Ukraine. The Ukraine signed a deal with Russia and decided not to go with the EU, and the CIA, the private Western central bankers decided to push protesting forward in the Ukraine. And they have been pushing and pushing and pushing, and we're seeing mass riots in the Ukraine right now. Now, the Ukraine, the former president of the Ukraine, is worried that if this continues, there is danger of a civil war. Now, we have to understand, the Ukraine, okay, no private Western central bank, they wanted them to join the EU, and they didn't. So what happens? The private Western central bankers create riots and have protests, and they tell the government, I can't believe you're not letting these people be democratic. They should have the right to protest, on and on and on and on. Then we move over to Thailand. Okay, now the government of Thailand, okay, is the puppet government of the United States, and the United States out in Thailand allows the government there to do daily terror attacks against the people. And these night raids are continually happening against those people who are protesting. So we have two things happening here. We have the puppet regime in Thailand, which is backed by the U.S. central bankers, and they say, you know what, let's do the night raids. We're fully behind you. We have to stop these protesters. In Ukraine, where there is no puppet government by the central bankers and U.S. government, they are saying the Ukraine is not acting fairly to the protesters. So again, this goes right back to what I've been saying, is those countries that do not have a private Western central bank and do not have a puppet government backed by the United States and the central bankers, they're okay with doing night raids and really bashing in the heads of the protesters. Those countries that do not have a puppet regime backed by the United States central bankers, they're on the rebel side, the protesters who are trying to get the government out. And we see this happening not just in Thailand and in the Ukraine, we see this in the Middle East also. We see Yemen, we see Iraq, we see Lebanon, Libya. The rebels, of course, in these countries, they call them Al-Qaeda. The terrorists, which are really the people of these nations trying to win back their country from the puppet regime and the central bankers. And we have the same thing happening in Ukraine and Thailand. It's happening in Syria, where the U.S. government central bankers back the rebels and they don't back the government, because the government in Syria does not have a private Western central bank and do not sell their natural resources using the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. The same thing's happening in Africa. They have the rebels on one side, which is backed by China, and then they have the puppet government in Sudan, which is backed by the United States. And the same thing is happening all across the world right now. And this goes on to say that just one day before the first deadly grenade attack in Thailand, the regime's red shirts enforcers announced they were stockpiling weapons in Bangkok and preparing for terror campaigns aimed at protesters, shedding any possible doubt as to who is behind the terror campaign. Additionally, the regime is seeking to impose emergency law across the city using its own terror campaign as pretext. Emergency law would make ongoing protests and any gathering for that matter illegal and open the door to more overt extreme measures. Now, again, this is happening in Thailand, where they're saying you cannot protest. They're locking everything down, basically creating martial law so the protesters don't rise up. Now, in Ukraine, the Ukraine government, which is not backed by the U.S. Government or central bankers, they're implementing the same law, but the U.S. government is saying that is undemocratic. You can't do this. The people have the right to speak up, and you can see the United States, the central bankers speak on both sides of the mouth. It all depends on what control they have, and this is what's really happening. This is what's happening around the world. Basically, the central bankers, U.S. government, are really losing control all over the place at this time. And they're trying to push their war agenda forward in every single one of these countries. I mean, think about it. The central bankers are in Africa. They're in Thailand. They're in the Ukraine. They're in the entire Middle East. This is getting out of control, and this is not going to end well for the U.S. government central bankers, because most of the time the people who are fighting for something, for their country, will rise up and push the central bankers out. And when this happens, the natural resources of these countries will not be sold using the U.S. dollar at all. And if it's not being sold using the U.S. dollar, the other countries do not need the U.S. dollars, and those will be coming back. And when they see this at a turning point, when they're losing, this is when the entire system is going to come crumbling down, and this is when we're going to see the false flag events. This is when we're going to see them blamed on another country, and they are completely preparing for this, because the U.S. government, the central bankers, do not want to be blamed for this collapse that is coming. Now, what's happening in Thailand, they are very worried that they might lose control of the situation. And they're very worried that Thailand might default on its debt, and they're very worried about this. So what is happening here is that investors, including Wells Fargo, they pulled out about $4 billion from the Thai stocks as of October 31st. And other investment companies like Pacific Investment Management Company, Goldman Sachs, all reduced debt holdings before protests first erupted in late October, because they saw what was coming, and if they lose control of the country, boom, there go all their investments. So they already pulled out because they understood what was going on there. Now, we see a lot of propaganda towards North Korea, how they're creating nuclear weapons with ballistic missiles to hit the United States. And most of the time, the central bankers and the U.S. government provoke these countries and put out the propaganda. Again, it's always those countries that don't have a central bank, or selling their natural resources using the U.S. dollar. And most of the time the propaganda came out during North Korea was because they were making deals with Iran to purchase oil, making a deal with China and Russia to create rail systems. And right now in North Korea, a recent geological study indicates North Korea could hold some 216 million tons of rare earths minerals used in electronics such as smartphones and high-definition televisions. The discovery would more than double the global known sources and be 6 times the reserves in China. You think the central bankers want those natural resources in North Korea? I do. And the potential bonanza could offer the isolated and impoverished North a game-changing stake in the rare earths industry. And we can see that the propaganda will continue, because as this discovery comes out and it's confirmed, you'll see more and more propaganda with North Korea. Now, China and Russia are going to hold joint naval drills in the Mediterranean. China and Russia have agreed to conduct a joint naval drill in the Mediterranean Sea, and what they're going to do there, the main aim of the joint naval exercise would be to increase the level of operational cooperation between the two navies, designed to tackle terrorist threats and improve joint rescue operations at sea within the Mediterranean area. Now, a couple reports ago, I talked about Japan, where they wanted to get rid of Article 9, where they have the ability to pledge war and go to war with any country. Well, Japan just drops no war pledge. A long-time no-war pledge has disappeared from Japan's Liberal Democratic Party's annual working policy. The party added it will amend the country's constitution and they will push this through because they need the ability to declare war. And why do they need the ability to declare war? Because they understand that World War III is coming. They understand this is where all of this is leading, because all of this debt across the world, that I should say the private Western Central Bank debt across the world, cannot be sustained. Europe is in a recession, teetering on a depression, and the U.S. is a complete illusion, and all they're doing is pumping up the stock market, which include the S&P, NASDAQ, and Dow. They pumped up the housing market. They manipulated the unemployment numbers. They manipulated GDP. They manipulated inflation, and I talked about this all in my other reports. They are continually manipulating all this to make you believe that there is a recovery here and to make sure that everyone is looking the other way when the collapse comes. And this is why they're continually pushing the gold down, because they don't want any indicator showing that there is a problem. Because if gold shot up to 2,000 or 1,900 or 2,200, people would be sitting here going, okay, there's something wrong with the economy. And again, this is why you continually see the smackdown in gold every so often, to keep the gold price lower and lower and lower until the last possible minute where it gets out of control and they can't do it anymore, and then all of a sudden gold rises so fast that it'll be impossible to get gold at this time. And believe me, you will know when this time period happens, because all of a sudden you'll see gold go up 100, 200, 300, and it will rise very quickly. Because we have to look at this. Gold is in a huge demand across the world. The Royal Mint said they ran out of gold coins. We see other countries putting huge premiums on gold. Here in the U.S., it's very difficult to get the gold, and we can see what is happening all over the place. Now, how are they going to go about distracting us from the collapse? And I've reported on this many times before. They originally used the false flag back in August with Syria, saying that they had Assad's government used a chemical attack, and they were pushing that forward, and that completely fell apart. So their whole goal is to remove Assad and to remove the government of Iran. I understand that they signed the peace deal and they're going along, because you have to remember the private Western central banks are infiltrating the Iranian banks right now. They made a deal where they'll be setting their interest rates within the country, and eventually they'll be moving, and they do this very slowly, and they will try to get the natural resources back on the U.S. dollar, and this is their plan. And they want Iran to do a couple things for them. And this, right now, what they're trying to do is they're trying to remove Assad from the government. And the central bankers are out there. They're trying to say that they want Syria to be involved in the upcoming Geneva II. First, they were talking about terrorism, and Kerry was out there saying, no, we want to replace the government and put in a transitional government and remove Assad from power. Now, we have to remember, for them to do this, it's not going to be easy, because it is a sovereign nation, and they just can't go in there and remove Assad. So they're going to try many different tactics. One of them is, again, I mentioned this many times, CNN reported that Assad has a secret cache of chemical weapons. I have a link here on the page. You can go and see the video from CNN, and they can use this as a false flag. They can bring the chemical weapons here into the country, into the U.S., and use them and allow the false flag to happen, and they can blame it on Syria. And also, they're building up the Syrian Electronic Army cyber attacks as a false flag, and you see that coming out every so often. And the last one was against Microsoft, and of course the Syrian Electronic Army said that they weren't finished with attacking Microsoft and other places. Now, the Syrian president Assad said Sunday he has no plans to stand down, stressing that only the Syrian people had the right to determine the country's future. Well, a U.S. envoy says Iran must back Syrian interim government. The U.S. ambassador to the United States to the United Nations, Samantha Power, said Monday that Iran must explicitly back an international call for a transitional government in Syria to take part in the peace talks this week. So they want Iran to help out with removing Assad and to place a transitional government within Syria. And we could see how they are maneuvering and scheming to get into Syria because, again, the central bankers need to get into Iran and Syria and put their natural resources on the U.S. dollar to prop it up for a little longer. And this is what they're doing right now. And the White House just admitted that many details of the Iran nuclear deal are secret. I wonder what actually is a secret in this deal, and I wonder what Iran has to do to complete the deal. And this has nothing to do with the nuclear agreement. They've been saying for over 30 years that Iran is going to create a nuclear bomb. They're 3-5 months away, and this went on for about 30 years or so at this point. So we know it really has nothing to do with the nuclear deal. This all has to do with getting into Syria and the central bankers infiltrating their banks and putting their natural resources on the U.S. dollar. This is the entire plan right now. Now, of course, the central bankers and the president always have some type of backup plan. And, of course, President Obama has not ruled out that Iran would not honor the agreement. And, of course, they always have some type of backup plan just in case everything that they've been talking about, peace, it doesn't work out. They will use other methods to get the job done. Because you have to remember, the goal is always the same. The tactic, the way they get there, might be different. And they're always ready to change if something happens. Now, we understand that the Sochi Olympics are coming up. I believe they start on February 7th. And right now, the U.S. is creating some type of rescue plan in case of terrorism at the Sochi Olympics. In the face of some type of possible attack by militants during the Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, U.S. military intelligence officials have been studying contingency plans for evacuating Americans from the Games in case of crisis. U.S. officials have concluded there would be a major obstacle to mounting a large-scale effort by the military or other U.S. government resources to evacuate Americans from Sochi. The most formidable roadblock U.S. officials have discussed regarding contingency plans for Sochi is that Russian authorities have historically been reluctant to allow foreign military forces, especially those of the United States, on Russian territory. Now, we understand that the FBI is already there helping to secure the location, and every time the FBI is any place, something happens in respect to terrorism. And if we can see right now that they've already put up a travel advisory, and there's also an advisory within Sochi about terrorism going on. And the State Department has warned Americans planning to attend the Games to be vigilant about their security because of potential terrorist threats. But some U.S. lawmakers complained on Sunday that Russians were not telling U.S. intelligence enough about threats from militant groups operating in the region. We don't seem to be getting all of the information we need to protect our athletes in the Games, Republican Representative Mike Rogers, chairman of the U.S. House Representative Intelligence Committee, told CNN. They're not giving us the full story about what are the threats, who do we need to worry about, which groups do we need to be looking at, and the terrorist groups who have had some success, are they still plotting? And they're not telling us anything. This is what Rogers is saying. Now, Senator King, told CNN yesterday that because of security concerns, I would not go, and I don't think I would send my family. And they're saying that the same Russian terrorists who successfully blew up a train station last month are now promising to kill tourists at Sochi Winter Olympics next month. And right now, the police in Sochi have launched an urgent search for a possible female suicide bomber who may have already made it past the ring of security set up by the Olympic Games. And this is being reported on ABC News. So we can see that they're pushing the propaganda because I really do believe they're going to try a false flag here in the Sochi Olympics. And this goes on to say, and this is from NBC News, Russian security services may be looking for as many as 4 Black Widows dispatched to carry out terrorist attacks related to the Winter Olympics. Militant groups in the Caucasus are known to use Black Widows, female terrorists, so-called because some seek to avenge the deaths of their husband. Now, there was a video put out by the terrorist, and basically what they say is, we'll have a surprise package for you, and those tourists that will come to you, for them too, we have a surprise. And it looks like they are building the propaganda at this point. It looks like they are building up this false flag event, and they're trying to push this event forward. And we most likely will definitely see something happening, because every time, and I've mentioned this before, we've seen them put a travel advisory, the FBI is there, and all of these alerts, something does occur. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.